What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Dragonfly video. Good to see you all once again. I hope you're all doing very well. Grab your coffees. We're giving another Morgan Day interview video. So this is basically the developers are making the rounds. Ian and Morgan are going around and just interviewing, like being interviewed by a ton of different people. And thankfully, they've structured this, like I think, in the correct kind of way, in the sense that they are making sure that the interviews talk about different things. So different topics, different ideas, which is really great. It means that none of these interviews are like overlapping. They overlap a little bit at this point, but they're not super stale. So we are going to talk about this interview with Morgan Day from the Starting Zone boys. And I've got some notes here. I'm going to skip around to what I want to talk about. There's some really important topics to get into. So this first one, let's just jump right into it. It's about the idea of hybrid classes and like bringing back that sense of like having a support character, you know, in terms of how they're building the talent trees, like making that flexibility.
Kind of harken back almost to that like Burning Crusade era of being able to almost specialize as like a support character where, you know, maybe you're a shaman who has a couple more abilities to support out and heal and do more off healing as a shaman versus some other spec that another shaman in your raid might be doing. So wanting to add a lot more identity there for sure.
So I think that's really, really awesome that they have this concept in mind, that they're actually like actively thinking about, okay, we have a shaman and we're going to introduce these new talent trees and we're going to introduce a whole bunch of new abilities. How do we make the shaman, feel like they have that hybrid class back, like fantasy back again? So, things like this ancient Ankh talisman, or no, sorry, Ancestral Wolf Affinity, where like you can do stuff while in Ghost Wolf form. You can do that in any spec, Deeply Rooted Elements may be making a callback, but this idea here, a Call of the Elements, resets the cooldown of your most recently used totem with a base cooldown shorter than 3 minutes. An elemental shaman could use this on their healing stream totem if they want, bringing back utility in the form of Mana Spring Totem, where if I'm doing my rotation correctly as an elemental shaman, if I'm pressing Lava Burst, I'm giving active mana back to my healer. On top of that, I do have things like Nature Swiftness, which makes my next chain heal instant cast, and cost no mana. So there's like Poison Cleansing Totem as well. Healing Surge being better on yourself. Stone Skin Totem. These are all potentially ideas that they're going to have in the base tree for Shaman coming up in Dragonflight. Right now, the only idea of like hybridity that we have for Elemental Shaman, let's say, is the idea of Ancestral Guidance, right? This is a 2-minute cooldown, and you press it, and all your damage and healing also heals other people. It's a great button, but it's like the only button that we have. So I do think that they are going to get back to a place where the hybridity, the hybrid nature of these different classes is really going to shine through. I think Earth Shield is going baseline, so you could, have that on, you could put that on somebody else. You could put it on the tank and have an extra little HPS sort of button for them there, right? You can get this Elemental Orbit and have an Earth Shield on yourself and an Earth Shield on the tank as well. Think about that for like Mythic Plus, which is really, really cool. There's just a lot of, I think, awesome ideas that they have in here that are starting to really harken back to the time like in BC when we had the hybrid nature of those classes, and that it basically just gives you a really good feeling as a shaman, maybe as a paladin, as a monk, maybe one of the other classes that has sort of that hybrid nature to them. That idea that you could make a build entirely where you get DPS or whatever on your elemental, let's say your elemental shaman tree, but you're really going hard on the healing and the utility, and you're there as like half a healer, and then somebody else could bring like a Shadow Priest and have the other half of the healing, and maybe bring a composition together that is able to be like 50 plus 50 equals 100, and you have a healer, but you actually have a tank and 4 DPS. Like, that would be so cool if they were able to really capture that hybrid nature of those classes. So I really hope that they're able to sort of nail that down. I'm really rooting for that. So let's move to the next point here. 430.
Objective still with them to have the last sort of talents in each. I mean, obviously.
So we're talking here about spec talents versus sorry, like class talents versus spec talents. And this was most notably a problem right now with the hunter tree stuff. So let me just go to Survival Hunter really quick and show you. They're going to talk about the problem with like Serpent Sting being over here on the class tree when it really feels like a Survival Hunter button. And I'm going to talk about that in a second as well.
We have very rough trees right now, but what about things where you can pick an ability in a spec tree that modifies an ability that you didn't pick in your class tree, things like that?
Yeah, totally. So that specific instance that you're talking about there, that's actually a topic we've been discussing a lot, since that's been a hot topic in the community about like, well, you know, there's a talent in my spec tree that modifies ability in my class tree. What if I didn't take it? Like, that's literally a dead talent at that point.
The problem with Survival Hunter has the reverse problem. You can pick up the ability in the class tree, but there's nothing that modifies it in the spec tree. Even though in the live game right now, Survival Hunter has lots of synergies with Serpent Sting, like Hydra's Bite, and so it's like, it makes no sense. Like, it's a Survival Hunter thing. I don't understand why there's no synergy at all in the spec tree.
That seems weird. So that's very much a thing that we're talking about adjusting. But actually, you know, just now talking about my class tree versus my spec tree, that's actually a big part of what we felt. You know, we originally started out when we were developing the talent tree as, you know, closer to a classic talent tree. It was just one big tree. And a kind of huge aha moment for us was when we were like, well, what if we actually had two trees and two types of talent points? Where we're awarding you one that can go in this tree and another that can go in this tree.
So here's what I want to say. There's like, he goes on for a long time to talk about how it was like a big aha moment for them that they're like, oh, we need to have two trees now. And it is very good. Like, this system is a good system, okay? Having these two types of trees is very, very good. The issue that I'm having, and that lots of other people are having, is that you might spec this out and have, in particular, let's take the hunter problem, where you've got Serpent Sting here in the bottom, and then over here on the Survival Hunter tree, which traditionally has Serpent Sting bonuses, you're not getting any synergy whatsoever. So they really do need to take a hard look at, and they did look at this, like Chimera Shot they removed because it's very much a marksman hunter thing, and they are going to move it into the marksman tree. And I'm hoping like this week we're going to get to see those modified talent trees, but we'll have to see what they say. But they definitely need to think really hard about like class identity, and Survival Hunter in particular needs to have some synergy with Serpent Sting. For example, what I've said in my Survival Hunter video is like, put Butchery here and then also put Hydra's Bite here. So you have two different forms of doing AoE. You can have your big Butchery hitting everybody and reducing the cooldown of your Wildfire Bombs, or you can pick Serpent Sting and have Hydra's Bite and hit like 4 targets with your Serpent Stings, and then your synergy with like Viper's Venom or Lethal Poison Injectors suddenly makes more sense. It makes more sense that this is here. But right now, they need to fix this problem. This is a huge, huge problem. I'm glad that they've created this system where you have like class identity stuff and then spec identity stuff, and you can get a lot of the crowd control and like different utility for your class over here, and then get your damage over here. But they must solve the problem of like having an ability down here that feels like it's more of a survival thing, and then having no synergy in the Survival Hunter tree. They've got to fix that. So I do hope that Morgan like understands the seriousness of that problem and that they're working on fixing it. Let's go to 730. This is a really good point here. Morgan's going to talk about the big pulls in Mythic Plus and dungeon design.
Yeah, and you know, just being able to say like, hey, this is my Mythic Plus raid. I made a note earlier about like, you know, Mythic Plus often people like to talk about the big pulls, but on the content side of things, we always try to come at it from the perspective of, you know, hey, we can have a dungeon where a 20 pull is a thing that could happen, but we also should be designing some of our dungeons where that's literally not possible. Like maybe I always like to point out, you know, dungeons like Theater of Pain is a great example.
Pain, right?
Most recently, where like, yeah, that's just a dungeon full of big bruiser creatures that, you know, you don't want to do giant pulls through large swaths of that dungeon. So really keeping an eye on how we're developing the content and making sure that that plays well with the systems.
So this is like a massive point that Morgan's making, and it's glad to actually hear it from Blizzard. You can tell in Shadowlands they made a very serious effort to try and make certain dungeons work for classes that have capped AoE. So shamans, outlaw rogues, There's probably some other ones there somewhere, but those are the ones that I played the most of, and it always felt bad to do less damage than the guys who has uncapped AoE. And the way to play the dungeon was always to pull as much as humanly possible, and then just AoE it down. And they're really, you can see that they're trying really, really hard to make it so that there's going to be some dungeons that are forcing you to play in a particular way, and that really makes the classes that do less uncapped AoE, like no uncapped AoE, those classes are going to shine because they should be able to do more damage than the classes that have uncapped AoE, right? A great example is going to be Outlaw Rogue coming in the new expansion. So the talent row down here, which is really cool, I'll get to it in a second once I fill this out, yada, yada. So you come down here, and you're going to get this. First of all, you get 3 more yards of range with Blade Flurry. Then here, Blade Flurry strikes 3 additional enemies and has a 3-second duration. So now it strikes 8 enemies. So they have better AoE already. Outlaw Rogue's going to have better AoE in Dragonflight already than they do in Shadowlands. And then finally down here, Blade Flurry damage is increased by an additional 3% per missing target below its maximum. So if you have 8 targets as your maximum amount, and you're only attacking 3 enemies in front of you, that means you're going to get 5 times 3%, 15% more damage from precise cuts. Okay? So that is really, really cool. That is them leaning into a class that has capped AoE. It's still capped. But what they're saying is, when you're in an environment with less enemies, like a Theater of Pain, or the middle section of Mists of Tyrannus Scythe, where you're fighting 4 or 5 enemies at once, this is where you're going to shine. Your damage will go up. You should be able to do more damage than the Windwalker Monk and the Destro Warlock, who are just like doing their big AoE rotation, right? This is a cool design. This is exactly what they need to keep doing, and I'm glad to hear that their philosophy is that they want to make sure that there are dungeons that are catering to the guys that don't have uncapped AoE. Really, really good signs from Morgan here. Let's get to 1245. They talk about raid buffs. This is a big hot topic discussion right now.
You know, some of the other buffs that we might be experimenting right now, we need to make sure that they're really cool and fun and are, you know, impactful. So there's the raid buffs with like party buffs versus party buffs like Wind Fury and Restless Crew, where there's definitely a line where we know exists where it is too far. And we're, you know, very early in alpha. And you can kind of expect us while we're this early to try to push as far as we can and kind of bump up against maybe where the line might be and then pull back. So that's very much where we are right now. We're really kind of testing out to see which ones work, which ones don't. And, you know, philosophically, we understand that there's definitely a line there where the complexity gets too much.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the big problems we saw with Burning Crusade was it got to the point where you felt like, well, I'm a rogue, and if I can't be in this specific party, you know, I am way worse. Not like, oh, I don't have Wind Fury, like it might be on live right now. I'm a little bit worse, but it's not a big deal. There's definitely the tipping point where it starts to feel like, oh, well, we already have the melee group. You can't sit with us, you know?
So there's a bunch of factors here that are interesting to talk about. Raid buffs are like really hard to manage, right? Because first of all, you want to make the raid buff like iconic for the spec or the class that's bringing it, right? Death Knights with their grip is raid utility. Priests having stamina is raid utility, and it makes sense with a priest. Priests having Leap of Faith is actually also raid utility. Those are kind of some of the smaller ones, but you know, Warrior having Shout, Monk having the debuff, DH having the debuff. What Morgan has said here is that they want to be really careful that they don't just make it like it was in Burning Crusade, where you had to take like one of everything because everything offered like an essential buff. He's saying there with rogues back in BC, it's like if you didn't have Wind Fury, you might as well not even be there. Like that's how bad it was. Nowadays they've really curbed a lot of those buffs and made it so that Wind Fury is helpful, but it's not like the be all and end all. It's not going to completely brick your raid if you don't have a Wind Fury there. So they need to balance like making them really cool and iconic with the spec, and then also making them actually desirable, that you want to bring it, but not so desirable that it's like if you don't bring it, it's the end of the entire game. So this is a really difficult job for them to have to do, to design these raid buffs and to make them work on those 3 different criteria. This is why Morgan has said it's so good that they have them out right now in front of us. You know, we have Restless Crew right here. We can look at it right now and we can give our evaluation. Is 0.2 seconds per combo point too much? Is it too little? Is this even worth bringing? Is this this is absolutely a cool and iconic, like it passes 2 out of the 3. It's cool and iconic and it fits with Rogue. It seems pretty powerful. Is it overpowered, underpowered? They need to like sort out that stuff. So I love that they're bringing this stuff. If it was me, I would have every single class have some sort of cool button that they can bring. I think that's actually a really good idea. But they obviously, as Morgan's saying, they need to balance it. It's good that we have it in our hands right now this early into alpha, and we can hopefully make sure that this is tuned really, really well come December. Because we've already got it right now, and it's July. So we have lots of time to play with this and figure it out, which is really good.
And that's definitely something that we are wary of. But we, you know, philosophically, like you said, it feels really fun to get like the PI or be in the group where you get that cool buff. So we think it's a fun design space and we want to continue to explore it, but we're very cognizant of the, you know, the potential pitfalls.
Morgan's going to talk here about end game content. This guy basically asks, Shield is asking like, what end game content could I do if I'm like if I'm off for the week for my raid? Like I've done my raid stuff for the week. What like end game cool stuff is there for me to do? Because we don't have like an AP grind anymore. Once you get to max level, you're done with your talents. So like what else is there for me to do out in the open world and yada yada?
So I wanted to ask, like, what is you know, a typical daily end game loop look like for a raider on an off night in Dragonflight? I want to log into the game. I want to play WoW. I want to do something with my character. You know, artifact power and anima aren't really on the table. So what am I looking at? What's the benefit?
Are you saying you're going to miss artifact power? And
well, I mean, on this show we are big artifact power fans.
Okay.
So
it's funny because Morgan just assumed that he was like he hated AP grinding. And these guys actually liked it, but most of us didn't like it that much. Like I actually am also, I think I'm with these guys. I didn't mind it. It got a little silly though.
But you know, I think there are examples of good artifact power and bad artifact power over the years from my perspective, right?
Totally.
But you know that kind of idea of like, well, if I log in, you know, okay, maybe I don't have raid tonight, or maybe my dungeon buddies aren't around, but I can log in and do this.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, like you mentioned with Dragonflight, a large, you know, theme for us from a very early on, you know, discussions with this expansion, you know, there's this, you know, underlying theme of like awakening, right? Like you saw
this is really cool.
This is really cool. Like was super epic and came out recently, and it was all about like this flame that was being reignited and the island kind of almost like turning back on. That's very much a theme that we wanted to consistently kind of have a through line through all of the expansion, and that included our features, right? So, you know, that idea of awakening or refurbishment and kind of rebuilding upon our foundations, which in some cases are, you know, pretty old, like with professions, they haven't really seen a big revamp in a long time. So
yeah, so this is really cool. I wanted to, like, when he started saying this, I actually didn't even realize how cool it was until I had really thought about it for a minute. But, like, think about Shadowlands and that we went to, like, the Realm of Death and, like, everything was basically dead there. And honestly, I actually love Shadowlands, but I know a lot of people think it's kind of a dead expansion and that it's been a very difficult slog to get through all of Shadowlands. Honestly, the game is in the best state it's ever been in right now, but lots of people have talked about it being a very tough expansion for them, that it was just a bit of a slog, you know? And I think, like, coming into Dragonflight, we're going to see literally so many features in the expansion get reinvigorated, reignited, and redesigned, that they are back to being, some of them are pulling from old school, you know, expansions, some are introducing new ideas, and they're really trying to, like, reignite the game and go from being like a dead state to being very alive and vibrant. And like, number one, you know, there's a redesigned profession system. They're just redesigning like the whole thing. They're really building on what they've learned over the last 15 years, and they're making this amazing new profession system that will be the fourth pillar of gear progression for your character, which is amazing and is going to be so much fun. They've redesigned the talent system from the bones up, pulling from the old Wrath and BC trees and grabbing from the new and combining them together to make these really amazing trees. They've redesigned the reputation system, turning it into basically just they've grabbed from the renown from Shadowlands, and they're bringing it into Dragonflight and saying, you're going to go to all these zones, you're going to earn renown. We're going to streamline the whole reputation system, and it's going to be so much easier to understand, and it's going to be a lot more fun. It's going to feel more rewarding. That's a redesigned system right there. They're iterating on the Mythic Plus system right now in Season 4, and they're adding in old dungeons and some new dungeons and changing up the loot table. They're really redesigning the way that Mythic Plus is going to be done in Dragonflight as well, having 4 new dungeons, 4 old dungeons. It's going to be really cool. On top of that, things like how you acquire gear, they're also going to iterate on that as well. In Season 4, there's going to be a loot vendor for raid stuff to help with bad luck protection, to help with your ability to grab those extra pieces that you really, really wanted, like Sylvanas' dagger or the jailer weapon or whatever it might be. So all in all, like, they are taking a huge swing in this expansion at redesigning everything. They're just taking it from the ground up and they're building it up again. And they've learned the lessons from the past, and they're bringing those in and making new systems that are, like, I think going to be amazing. And I think this idea of the expansion being an awakening, coming from Shadowlands, where it was very kind of dead, moving into this state where we're kind of like alive, where we've awoken, and all these new systems are waking up with us, and they are bringing new life into the game. And I think that everybody's going to really experience that when we get there. So this is an exciting point, and I just wanted to make sure I hammered it home. Let's go to 2035. They talk about mega dungeons in Dragonflight.
Pool. How is the team feeling about the mega dungeon concept, and is that something that you plan to explore in the future?
I definitely think it's working out pretty well. Like, in terms of, we have this mega dungeon that is like almost like a 5-player raid. It's a great opportunity to visit and give a lot of space for some of these storylines that aren't maybe not like, I guess we'll call it like the A plot, right? Like Mechagon was not like the thing that we were all worried about at the time. Tazavesh very much has this interesting story to go along with it. So we really like that idea of almost having like a raid level space to explore with these other storylines, and then taking that dungeon, splitting it in half, and introducing it into the Mythic Plus pool later feels like it's working out pretty well. There's some tweaks that we've talked about with like kind of the itemization of the mega dungeons, and trying to make sure that they're appealing and something that people really want to pursue, rather than just like, these dungeons might, before they roll into the Mythic Plus pool, might not be as viable for as long as we would want them to be. So we're having some conversations around kind of the loot in them, as it were.
So it's good. I mean, I think he didn't say that they're going to have a mega dungeon in Dragonflight, but it's probably a foregone conclusion at this point. They've seen 3 of them. You had Karazhan, and then you've got Mechagon, and now you have Tazavesh. They've all been, I think, wildly successful. Everybody really enjoys Karazhan. I loved Mechagon, and then Tazavesh as well. And they're obviously bringing them back in Season 4, so that's how much they think that people like them. So I think clearly in patch like 10.1 or 10.2, we're going to get another mega dungeon for Dragonflight. They're probably developing it right now, so we'll just have to wait and see. Last topic here, 2210. This is about gear in Dragonflight, as he was just alluding to. Let's listen in on this.
Dragonflight, are we going to see a return to of systems like the Creation Catalyst and
Creation
that
Catalyst
sort of system, as well as it's seeming like there's a lot of vendors and upgrading of gear that is already being talked about
in
inside
Season
of
4
inside of the game. So is that something? Can you just expand on that a little bit more for us, as far as raid gear and things like that go? Are we seeing upgradable gear again? Are we seeing catalyst gear again? Is that something we're going to be?
Yeah, I'll try to hit a couple different topics there.
Thanks,
So one, yes, we were overall happy with the Creation Catalyst in terms of the goal of not only creating catch-up for people who might want to have an alt or come into the patch a little late, feeling like they're not weeks and weeks away from, having their set bonus, but also just that kind of bad luck protection, as it were. There's kind of the backstop on someone who, I've only got
that was
one
good
piece of tier set, and it's been X weeks. Catalyst turns on, cool, I get my 2-piece, then shortly after that my 4-piece. The iteration that we've talked about there is more around timing. Like I forget how many weeks in the Creation Catalyst opened up off the top of my head now, but there was definitely lots of posts
so this is
on
good
Reddit around like turn the thing on. So we're talking about like timing and potentially looking at what kind of tweaks you might want to do there, but overall we were happy with that system.
So it does sound like they're gonna have a creation catalyst system in Dragonflight, and they're gonna turn it on quicker than they did in Shadowlands, which is very good.
I think you're talking about like kind of the season 4, how there's a way to acquire like a set number of items in a very like you know, finite manner. Yeah, that's something that we always like to experiment with, itemization, and especially like we mentioned, like this bad luck protection, right? Like, you know, we all have the buddy who never got the Sylvanas daggers and was quite upset by that. And there's only like a small handful of items that usually exist like that within a certain patch. So that's definitely an area where we want to continue to explore with more deterministic ways to get, you know, kind of to make progress towards your goals.
So this is really good. This is good to hear from Morgan that they have seen how people were really mad about maybe not getting the Sylvanas bow or the daggers from Sylvanas, or, you know, there's all kinds of items. Like maybe you didn't get your first sigil, which I actually hate that trinket anyway, but maybe you really wanted to get it and you couldn't get it. There's all kinds of items in the raid where, like, as the items are deeper into a raid, it becomes more difficult to get those items, and that makes the items more epic, and that's really cool. But having to go farm an entire raid each week and then kill Sylvanas, which is like a 10-12 minute fight, and do it on like heroic or whatever, like that's a really big feat, and not everybody can do that. And it's kind of sad to say that like nobody can ever get the gear that's on that boss, simply because of like how long it takes to get to the fight, to do the fight correctly, and to get the kill, and then you're fighting against the chance it'll actually drop, which is probably very low. So it's really good to see they're going to experiment with this in Season 4, right? And say, in Season 4, we are going to have a vendor, and that vendor, they're definitely just going to see how well that is received by the community and how it kind of plays out with their goals of how quickly they want us to acquire gear, because I'm assuming they have some sort of goal that way. So it's good to hear that, Morgan, that they're talking about it, they're considering it. Again, I think they're just going to watch what happens in Season 4, both for the Mythic Plus stuff and for the raid stuff in terms of loot, and then see what to do in Dragonflight and how it's kind of well received with the community. So that's it, guys. That is the entire video. I'll just kind of recap it here. They do want to bring back the ability for certain specs like Shaman and Priest to be more supportive, to have that hybridity really shine through. Being like a Shadow Priest or an Ellie Shaman, having tools to help heal your team, remove poisons, whatever the case might be. They're going to bring back that with the talent trees, which is a very, very cool thing. I can't wait to figure out like cool Mythic Plus compositions, maybe not having a healer at all. There was the class talents versus the spec talent problems. I really do think that I talked about this in relation to Survival Hunter. They've got to solve this, I think, by making really powerful choice nodes in the like spec tree. So for example, if there's an ability in the class tree, there needs to be some corresponding talents in the spec tree that can coordinate with that. Now, they should be choice nodes, because if you never take Serpent Sting, you don't want to feel bad that you have a dead Serpent Sting buff talent in your spec tree. So that's why I'm saying it should be something like Serpent Sting's in the class tree, and then Hydra's Bite is in the spec tree, but you could also take Butchery. So if you don't take Serpent Sting at all, then you don't have to take Hydra's Bite, and it's not a dead talent. You can just take Butchery instead and get a buff to your carve. They need to approach it that way, so that if you want to take it in the class tree, there's buffs waiting for you. If you don't want to take it in the class tree, those buffs that are waiting for you aren't dead talents, they're choices, and you can choose something else. I feel like that's how they could solve that. Morgan talked about Mythic Plus pulls and being really, really big, like a Halls of Atonement, and they're very conscious of wanting to make dungeons that are more like Theater of Pain, maybe more like Mists a little bit, so that the capped AoE classes have a fighting chance of actually doing a little bit of damage in those dungeons, which is really good. Raid buffs, they like the idea of raid buffs, and they're going to continue to make them, but they're also very cognizant of the power level there and how dangerous it could be, and they're very, very careful. They're going to be very careful about what they make. This is why they've had them out in the alpha so early for us to look at and for us to test. Things like Restless Crew, etc. What endgame content is available if you're like in an off night for raid? I think like this was the focus on the reawakening of all the different systems that are in this game. Reawaken profession system. That's something you can spend your time on, a lot of time. Reawaken talent system. You can spend time just looking up new builds and trying out new different ideas. There's a reinvented like reputation renown system for the different factions. And we heard from another interview that the factions will have different reward tracks going for them. Like if you're in the Tuskar zone and you want to get your fishing stuff going, you can start there and start building up your renown with them so that you can really get some fishing stuff going on. I think that there's going to be lots of outdoor world content to do, particularly tied to crafting, and that it will be a valuable use of your time to invest into crafting, because you can literally make some of the best gear in the game right from then. You can become, there's a second talent tree there, right? You can go and get a blacksmithing talent tree and start working on that. So if you do have a night off and you don't want to be raid, or you're having a night off from Mythic Plus, there's actually going to be lots to do in the game, even though there isn't like an AP grind anymore. There's mega dungeons likely to come in Dragonflight, probably not till patch 10.1 or 10.2, but they like the mega dungeon idea. And then gear in Dragonflight will be upgradable via a creation catalyst style station. And I think they're going to wait and see how Season 4 goes with the raid vendor, and then see if they're... I think it sounds like Morgan wants to introduce that into Dragonflight, but they're just going to probably wait and see how it works in Season 4 in Shadowlands. So get into Season 4, go get the raids done, and show Blizzard that it's a really good system so we can have it in Dragonflight, okay? That's it, guys. That's another interview with Morgan Day. Once again, these interviews keep happening with different creators, and it's really awesome to see them. I'm really excited to have them there. Really, really good details that we're getting on the game and how it's going to look in Dragonflight. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Of course, as always, if you like these videos, drop a like and subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. If you want to support the future of what I'm doing here, Patreon is the best way to do that, and there are different tiers of rewards you can get, so go check that out down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you all. I will see you in the next one.